Welcome back to the internet, guys, and today I'm going to be showing you Trigger, which I freaking love. And before I get into this, I just want to say, in no way am I affiliated with Trigger, apart from that I do want to see them succeed because I just really love this product, and if they went away, I would, well, I wouldn't contemplate But my point is that you rarely find a product where if it went away, you would be really pissed. Like, if the iPhone went away, I'd just buy a Pixel, you know, it's not that hard. But if Trigger went away, I seriously don't know what I would do. And don't worry, guys, because I know it looks a little bit technical, but I'm gonna explain why it's actually extremely easy to use. But before we get into that, I'm gonna talk about the problem that we actually have to solve, because a lot of businesses and side projects, they run in either two places, okay? So a lot of your automations and business logic, as it's called, is gonna run on either somewhere like Zapier, Make, n8n, one of these no-code platforms. I'll show you my n8n right here. And the other way to do it is to basically just write all your code, have it run on a server somewhere or in the back end of your website. And there is a fucking ocean between those two options, because one of them is super easy, you drag and drop, and then the other, you literally have to know how to code and you have to do all this stuff and know how to set up a server. It's a massive difference. And they also have a lot of their problems, like, in their own. So first of all, Zapier is clunky. I have a video where I was talking about how you should use n8n, and I trashed Zapier. I still hate Zapier. So you can just try Zapier for yourself if you won't take my word for it. n8n is a lot better, but I just want to show you, I mean, this is my n8n. I built a decent amount in here, and if we just load this up, I mean, first of all, it takes forever to load, and then this is my workflow, and dude, there are so many problems when it comes to editing. I made that video last time a little bit preemptively, because when it comes to actually like editing your workflow, you have to test each step individually. So you hit test step, and then you pin the previous data. But I kept getting this problem where I'd hit test, and it wouldn't work. And you can't just like, you have to refresh the page, and then you have to redo the whole workflow, and it becomes a massive pain in the ass to use. And that's just the problem, because it's no code, it's very like abstracted, and you're always gonna face problems where you just can't solve it, and it takes a ton of time. The other thing with no code is I found that, yeah, it's pretty fast. If I want to add like a webhook, I mean, there it is, that's an endpoint. I'll click out of it, but there it is, that's our endpoint, and then we can like customize the URL. And now it's not even working. I can't. Oh, jeez, dude. Although it's good to actually like build things with no code, and it's kind of fast, you end up getting stuck at a lot of places where you just can't do something that you could in a more sophisticated environment. Like, you basically just, like any of these things, I'll probably get hung up, and because it's in like a UI interface, like if we go to this part where I have to get the company access token, because it's a weird API, they have a really weird way of like requesting the data. Oh no. All right, my light died, but I'm back. They have a really weird way of requesting the data, and it ends up being a problem because in order to get this like all correct, you can't just copy from their documentation, like the fetch request. You can't just copy and paste because there's no code. You have to fiddle around for like 3 hours until you fix it, where in a more sophisticated environment, it might take 10 minutes to get it set up, probably less. So that's kind of the downside of no code, and why I recommend kind of learning something a little bit more sophisticated. But then we come over to something more sophisticated, and again, we have a problem. I mean, first of all, this is a JavaScript document, which I'll talk about in a second. But let's just go to the logs here, and I'm just going to show you what the actual problem is, because this is what you get when you're running basically code on a server. You get a log section here where they just give you a bunch of red lines and a bunch of black and white lines, and yeah, you can output data to it, but it gives you zero context into how well things are working, how fast they're executing. You have to literally like build a separate product to actually figure out what's going on here, and it just becomes a massive pain in the ass. So that's why I say there's a fucking ocean between something like this and something like this, which are both bad. And I mean, there's just been no solution until I started using Trigger. So let's get into it. Now, first of all, the definition of trigger as defined by the co-founder or CEO or whoever he is, it's described as the technical version of Zapier, which I totally agree and I totally love. Quick example. So with Zapier, you get a lot of integrations, and Trigger has this stuff built in for you. So you get OpenAI, Mailgun, Twilio, Resend, whatever you actually need, like all this stuff. And amazingly, they have a Notion integration, which I like using Notion. You can integrate with AWS, Airtable. You can basically integrate with whatever you need. And by the way, they're also backed by Supabase. So you can integrate with a lot of these different tools without having to like mess around with APIs on your own. But we should explain a little bit more about what Trigger.dev actually is and how it works, because I'm sure you're confused. I was extremely confused for a long time. So essentially what they do is they allow you to write your workflows and then deploy them to their servers, or you can self-host it, which is more complexity than I actually want. And then they handle all of this kind of stuff that's like such a pain in the ass to deal with on like a typical server or even an n8n. So let's say you're making a call to OpenAI, their API. I mean, a lot of the time your call is just gonna fail. It's like when you're talking to ChatGPT and it just doesn't respond, it just shows an error. You have to actually like copy your message and paste it again. And that's a problem if you're relying on that workflow to actually serve your customers. So with Trigger.dev, they're gonna automatically retry failed tasks. And n8n just doesn't have that. It fails and then you're shit out of luck. I mean, if it fails, like you better have a way to know about it. So what Trigger.dev does is it hosts your code. It allows you to actually look at all of your runs. So I'm gonna pull up my Trigger, and if I just go to my current project, then something really cool is here. So first of all, we can see every single task that I have set up, and we can see like a map of all the activity and failures and all that stuff. But the cool thing is if we look at the run logs, it's actually going to show you exactly what the workflow is doing. So it's going to show you, okay, yes, it started on the chronological schedule, and then it ran, and here's the output. All right, I'll try to give a little bit of a better example, because this right here, this is a fat ass workflow. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to break down the whole workflow for you. So you get as much like reporting and visualization into what's happening. Same thing with like n8n, which doesn't have this. You have no idea to tell how long something's taking. And with this, you can literally see like, okay, this step took 885 milliseconds because I was calling an API, and then this API call to OpenAI. Yeah, anyways, this one, getting the cost of the call, that was only 100 milliseconds, and you can actually see all this data, which becomes so valuable. The other thing about Trigger, like n8n or Zapier can't handle, is if you're running a business on it, well, you're gonna deploy your product, and if you get customers, your customers are gonna want your product to work, obviously, right? And you're gonna want to change things, but as you change things, you're gonna break things, and typically in a typical like enterprise business, you're gonna have, or any business, you're gonna have a development, and then you're gonna have a production kind of staging. And with Trigger.dev, you can easily like get like everything started on your computer locally, test everything out, and then when it's ready to go, you deploy it to the servers so that the customers can actually use it. So you basically like prevent yourself from shooting yourself in the foot. I mean, with n8n, if I want to make a little change here and I accidentally make a mistake, I'm gonna have to, and I make a mistake and then I press save on accident. I haven't changed anything, I don't think, and it wants me to save. But if I press save, that could fuck something up in the back end, and I have no idea. So that's why Trigger.dev is so strong. But there's one thing that does tend to be pretty nice about n8n and Zapier and all these kind of things. And I mean, let's try to put together a demo here. So if we just go refresh location, so we'll test this. So we'll hit test step. This is a cron trigger. It's supposed to fire every 20 hours. So let's test that. And then I'll pin this data so we can use it in the next step. And then I'll come to list locations. And what we're gonna do here is, oh wait, actually these are uncoupled. I'll test this one, because I want to get some fresh data. And then for this one, if you can see, we're using data from the last step in this step right here, okay? So all I need to do is I go from refresh token. So I'm gonna grab that refresh token, just drop it in there, and boom, we're good to go. Obviously, I don't wanna do that. But yeah, all you do is you drag and drop from one step to the other. And that's why no code is so easy. But I'm gonna show you something that I recently started using, and it's been fucking insane. If you're not a developer, you might be screaming right now. Don't worry. I will make this simple and easy. Let's get an example going here. So this is my Trigger.dev code, and don't worry, it's not hard to code. This is my Trigger.dev code, and it's written in TypeScript. TypeScript is a type of JavaScript. It's actually a superset of JavaScript. So you have JavaScript, and then you have TypeScript. So you can write everything in TypeScript, and it gets compiled to JavaScript, which means it can run basically anywhere. So the advantage of TypeScript, I'm gonna show that right now, because what we're doing in this workflow here is we're using a Stripe, the Stripe integration to charge a customer. And this can actually be a bit of a pain in the ass, all right? And by the way, if I wanted to do this in no code, I don't even know if I could. I mean, it's like a specialized use case, and anything that's not remotely normal is going to be a pain in the ass in no code. So anyways, what we're doing is we're creating a payment intent, and after we create that payment intent, then we also want to get the default payment method off of the customer, all right? And the cool thing about this is look at this long ass line of code. I don't know what this is. I don't know like why it looks like this, right? But what we can do is we can say payment method. We'll just define a new variable, and we'll say that's going to be await. Maybe you don't have to await it. It's going to be Stripe, or it's going to be our payment intent dot, and then if I tried to do like payment method here, I mean, first of all, I spelled this wrong, so that's gonna be an issue. But wait. All right, it was a bad example because payment intent exists. But if I try to do .type and I hover over it, it's gonna tell me, it says TS TypeScript. Property type does not exist on this type of object, because this is the object that we're creating. And it's saying this type does not exist, which is so fucking useful, because when you're normally coding, dude, it's like so hard to guess, because literally you would be looking at Stripe documentation, you'd be coming back here, you'd be like, okay, is it type info? And then it's still not gonna work. It's gonna say, no, it doesn't exist. And if you were just doing JavaScript, you would compile this, you would run it, or you wouldn't compile it, but you would just run it, and you would get an error. And that's not gonna happen with TypeScript. It's literally gonna tell you exactly what exists and what doesn't. It's basically like drag and drop editing. And let me try to break down just another example here. So if we go over to my call recording workflow, so this is the workflow that handles a phone call being finished and then the call recording being dropped to my task. And this is extremely useful. This is something you can define in TypeScript. It's called an interface, or I believe I can change this to type and it's the same. Nope, never mind. But essentially this is gonna tell your code in your program, or actually it's gonna tell TypeScript what your payload is gonna look like what the data you're dealing with is gonna look like. So if we go down to somewhere where I'm using, let's go like location ID. So if we go down to this, and if I said, okay, payload.location ID, and I tried to use that, it's gonna tell me right now that location ID does not exist on the payload that I sent in. It has to be location ID. And this is such an enormous time saver, and also an enormous just benefit to your entire life, that, I mean, it basically makes coding like no code. I mean, there's still a bit of a learning curve, but really, like, I would be a week back in my development process if I wasn't using TypeScript. So that brings us on to our second benefit of Trigger, and basically, It's that you get to pick your own IDE. I mean, an IDE, if you're not sure, is an integrated development environment. So I'm using Zed. You could also use VS Code, is extremely popular. You could use Vim. You could use fucking TextEdit. And here we are with that same Stripe workflow that we were just looking at in TextEdit. I mean, you could use this. It's fucking terrible. It's horrible. I mean, you would never want to do this, but you could. I mean, the benefit of doing that is just amazing. Like, you can actually use whatever program you want to edit your workflow, and it just makes for such a better development experience. But the other thing about using your own IDE is, let me remind myself, is Copilot. You may have heard about GitHub Copilot and how some lawsuit is happening because they're using other people's code to train a robot that replaces them. And I just want to say, I fucking love Copilot. And this is one of the biggest benefits of Trigger, is that you can actually work with Copilot to build your execution programs. So let's just get a really good example. So to demonstrate this, we're back in our Stripe charge workflow. Now, what I used to have here is that if the payment failed, it would basically just wait a day and then it would return. But we could actually automate the way that it charges customers. So if their payment fails the first day, it'll wait one day and then it'll charge them again. And let's actually just get rid of this. I want to basically make it so that it waits one day and then it tries to charge them again, then a couple days. So I'm just going to write that out in comments. So we'll say if payment fails, wait for a day and retree. I mean, is there anything else to that? If payment fails, wait for a day. No. Payment failed, wait for a day. And then we'll say add tag failed payment. And then we'll say, and that tag, by the way, I'll show you, is really useful in Trigger. I mean, I don't know if it's useful yet, but it'll kind of show you like what your runs are. So I can see, okay, so these message here are from Facebook and social, and their social messages. So that way I can basically break down my runs when I'm going to debug later on. But we'll say payment failed, wait for a day, add tag failed payment. And then one other benefit of Trigger that I just thought of is you can run tasks for like, I don't know, indefinitely, like a really long time. So if I say wait for a day, it's fine. It's going to pick up in a day. Whereas if you were using something like AWS Lambda or something else like a serverless environment, you would be getting charged $1 million to let it run for a day because they're keeping the server open for you. Whereas here, they have a way to shut it down and then re-wake it up when it's ready. So anyways, we're going to confirm the payment and then attempt to charge again. So let's see how this goes. I've done this a couple times, but we have Copilot. You've probably seen Copilot in the background. When I start to type something, it's going to give me a suggestion. Dude. All right, so there we go. So it's saying, basically, if I press tab, I can accept that change, all right? So we'll go payment failed, wait for a day. So we'll go, boom. Look at this. It's looking at these comments and it's doing exactly what I want. So I'm like freaking just dying over here, just like, bro, I've been working for 12 hours and I don't know what to type. And then I press enter and it just types exactly what I need. And then we'll go await charge again. And this is going to be a bit of a challenge because it's a bit further up. But let's say we'll just do await. Or no, we'll do const try again. And look at this. Dude, it's literally filling in that entire same line from up above that we were just using. It used the same payment intent ID that we had. And if I press enter, then it'll pull in the exact same values that we needed. And then I can press tab again to accept that. And we have the exact same line. I mean, this is a weird example because I'm literally could have copy pasted the line, but it's writing it for you without you having to know the actual syntax. You just write comments and then it writes the code for you while you basically sit there and press tab. And that is the absolute best thing about, Copilot is fucking amazing. And then I just want to give one more example because with TypeScript, Copilot works fucking amazing because basically I'm trying to call this function right here and you have to like organize it in a specific way so that it actually functions properly. And this can be kind of a pain in the ass. You have to keep switching back and say, okay, what type of object does this one need? And with TypeScript, you can basically just go, okay, so I know I want to send a type, so that's gonna be that. And then the code is gonna be that. Yup. And then, then we're gonna define our queue, or we'll just do an idempotency key. And boom, there's a little bit of a formatting error here, but dude, it's absolutely insane. It literally writes code for you. Like, Copilot is one of those products that you just never get bored of. Like, every day you have that moment where you're just like, oh, tab, and you write like 2 minutes of code in 5 seconds. It is fucking amazing. So I love Copilot, and biggest thing is you get to use Copilot and TypeScript with Trigger. So then the last thing is serverless. I'll bundle this from with the last benefit. Serverless computing and concurrency, and let's also say queues and okay, so I'm gonna bundle all this together, but basically if we go back, I'll just scroll through this so you can see, but you can run jobs all at the same time. You don't have to worry about setting up a server and managing infrastructure and all this stuff because that's a fucking pain in the ass. And then there's a couple things called concurrency and idempotency. And when you're dealing with things like charges and like money, idempotency is extremely important because if someone refreshes the page and every time they refresh the page, you're sending data to your server to charge them or to give them money, you don't want it to just work every single time they refresh their page. So typically you'll have some type of idempotency where you'll refresh the page once, it'll send that special value to the server, and then the server, every time it gets it from then on, will know, okay, we've already processed this. That's idempotency. That means that, and otherwise, dude, it's such a pain in the ass. You have to like create like a whole table in your database to store all this stuff to manage it. And with Trigger, you don't. They literally include it. If we come back here, we're passing in so this is when it actually like charges the customer, or this is when we adjust the balance of the customer. This is a good example. We're passing in an idempotency key. So that means when we're adjusting this balance, we only want it to happen once with this payment intent, which is like a Stripe charge value. So we only want that to happen once. And then the concurrency key, basically this is fucking sick because if we look at our adjust balance method, okay, we're pulling out the company balance. So we're looking in the database, we're saying, okay, wait, where's it gonna be? Company, select balance. Okay, so we're selecting the balance. So we're pulling out the balance, and then I'm doing a couple things in between, and then I'm updating that balance with the new amount. So the new balance is gonna be the past balance plus the change. And then eventually here, we're updating that one record with the new balance. But there could be a scenario where, you're reading the balance right here, and the balance is $100 at start, and then task 2 right here is reading the balance a millisecond after, and it also sees $100. But then when the first task goes to write, it's saying minus $50, so a $50 charge, it's gonna write $150, right? Or no, it's gonna write 50. Good thing that looks like a dollar sign. So it's gonna write $50 to the database. But then task number 2 is adding $50, and it also saw 100 at the start, so it's gonna write 100 plus 150. So you're basically giving the customer a free $50 in this scenario, and you have to like figure out how to solve this. And the great thing about Trigger is that stuff is solved for you. It's not gonna write to the database at the same time because we're using a concurrency key right here, which is the company ID. So for the same company, for the same balance value, it can't write at the same time. We have a limit of 1. And yeah, this video is already really long, but hopefully that kind of helps you understand what Trigger is and how it works and why it's so fucking good. I know I talked a lot about TypeScript and Copilot, which are fucking amazing, but the reality is you don't get these benefits when you use a no-code tool like n8n or Zapier or Make, and you also don't get these benefits. I mean, you don't get the benefits of actually seeing into your workflow, seeing what the data looks like and testing them whenever you want with like an actual server. It's way more of a pain in the ass. So anyways, Trigger is fucking awesome. Yeah, I'll see you in the next video, I guess.